Finally today, Palmer Amaranth has been at the borders of Nebraska for about 5 years now. In that time, data has shown that crop interference caused by the weed can significantly reduce yields in row crops such as corn and soybeans. However, Palmer Amaranth interference hasn't been previously studied in dry beans until now. A group of UNL researchers have recently released their findings on the subject, and Market Journal's Bill Dodd brings us this story.
We know Palmer Amaranth can significantly reduce yields of corn and soybeans if left unchecked. So, how much can Palmer Amaranth impact your dry edible bean yields? After 2 growing seasons in western Nebraska, researchers have determined that Palmer Amaranth is more competitive with dry edible beans than with corn or soybeans. Furthermore, yield reduction from complications with this weed can be noticeable very quickly.
So because it's a short season crop, the time that dreadable bean is emerging from the soil, it lines up really well when Palmer Amaranth can be emerging. So soybeans, you can usually get ahead of Palmer a little bit because you're just planting earlier in the year. But with dreadable bean, you're going to have that emergence of the crop coincide with the emergence of the weed. And so because of that, we're seeing more yield reduction for Palmer Amaranth. On top of that, in addition to the way that the emergence time lines up between the crop and the weed, dreadable bean compared to soybean is shorter. And because of that, it tends to not compete as well. It's a low stature crop. And so it gives more opportunity for that Palmer Amaranth to emerge through the canopy earlier in the year. 4 Palmer Amaranth plants for 100 or per 1,000 square feet was equivalent of 5% yield loss. And that's where we're going to say the farmers can start noticing that yield reduction. So pretty low on that number for when that yield reduction is going to occur.
When dealing with crops like sugar beets or dry edible beans, producers have far fewer herbicide options to choose from. However, there are far fewer cases of herbicide resistance. In the case of Palmer Amaranth appearing in this area, if there happens to be herbicide resistance, then your post-emergence options are, for the most part, non-existent.
Post options are gone. So all we really have is pre-emergent herbicide options, and those work really well. But once those wear out and lose their efficacy, somewhere between 3 to 6 weeks after planting, we don't have any other options. And so the best thing you can do as a grower is to apply a second shot of Outlook. If you applied it first, or if you haven't applied that, you can follow up whatever pre-program you're using with Outlook, and that can be applied. You want to get that hopefully out before you have another flush of Palmer Amaranth. But if we can have that overlapping residual treatment, where before the first residual from the pre-treatment wears out, you get a second residual herbicide, and that kind of carries you through the end of the season. So that's our best option. Beyond that, yes, walking the field, hand pulling. We do have folks in the area that are still doing a lot of cultivating, and those are all options, but they tend to get time consuming and expensive, and not a lot of labor right now to do that.
While herbicide treatments may be limited when dealing with Palmer Amaranth, it is recommended to implement a zero-tolerance weed control policy. While you may not see any yield reduction or growth interference from a single plant, that one plant by itself can contribute to an explosion in Palmer Amaranth population down the road.
And so that one plant, as we were demonstrating, can produce anywhere from up to 500,000 seeds per plant. Likely that one weed's going to probably be noticeable towards the end of the season. It might have emerged late in the season, and so it might not be that large, and maybe it's only going to produce a couple thousand seeds, but that's still a few thousand seeds that you're can put into the seed bank that next year. And if those are left uncontrolled next season, the math's pretty extreme with that. That's a few thousand seeds times a few thousand seeds, and pretty soon you have a explosive population growth. And that's this reason behind this idea of zero tolerance weed control, which although that's the term used, most times that's not practical. But if you are driving around in a field, it's otherwise clean, you see a Palmer Amaranth out there, it might be worth it to run out there and pull it before it goes to seed. We got to be thinking about weed control, not just in this year, but also 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road. And anything we can do to limit that seed input within the seed bank is going to help us down the road.
As we continue to inch our way toward another growing season, those who are planting dry edible beans should stay vigilant of their fields and do their best to ensure that Palmer Amaranth isn't allowed to throw a wrench in the cogs of their operation. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.